Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on KTN News for yet another edition of A Checkpoint. I am Akisa Wandera. Well, it's a pleasure to have you tuned in. An emotional moment for Ashamwilu and Rashid, but a very proud moment for the Standard Group family. KTN's Ashamwilu and cameraman Rashid Edi are this year's winners of the prestigious CNN Journalist of the Year award. The two were the only television journalists from the Eastern African region to make it to the list of 38 finalists. They were awarded the top prize, in South Africa after winning the News Impact category award for their documentary Terror Crossing, which investigated terror activities along the Kenya-Somalia border. The Standard's Dominic Omondi won the EcoBank Economic and Business Award.
The CNN Multi-Choice African Journalist 2016 Awards saw the best of the best journalists gather at the Kalaha Convention Center in Johannesburg, South Africa, with 38 finalists hoping to win awards in 14 categories and ultimately the top prize, the CNN Multi-Choice African Journalist of the Year Award, the most prestigious award for journalists on the continent. And KTN carried the day. Asha Ahmed Mwilu, the features and documentaries editor for KTN and KTN News, the only 24-hour news channel in the region which draws from the rich news heritage of the KTN brand, and senior cameraman Rashid Edi were awarded the top prize after beating 37 other finalists chosen from a record number of 1,637 entries.
It's such an honor and it's such a privilege to be representing the continent this way, and most importantly just to get a pat on our shoulders, like well done, gives us motivation for the next story, so we're really pleased.
The story was so important because in past few years, terror has been creeping inside Kenya, and we tried to cover this story to let people know that the terror is so big, it's a big problem in the whole world, not only in Kenya.
The two were awarded the overall prize for their documentary, Terror Crossing.
As much as the county commissioner paints a picture of political and clan interests interfering with the war against terror, one thing does not add up.
Terror Crossing aired on KTN's investigative segment, The Lead. The in-depth investigative documentary explored the security intrigues at the Kenya-Somalia border in Wandera County at a time when Kenya was initiating plans to build a wall at the Kenya-Somalia border in a bid to boost security and keep out Al-Shabaab militants in its war against terror.
School dropouts in Wandera are always an easy target for Al-Shabaab recruiters.
Asha and Rashid were winners in the News Impact Award, which recognizes stories that, as a result of their coverage, have made a sustainable impact in areas such as reaction within the target audience, increased public awareness, and tangible changes in behavior or policy.
The Kenyan government has admitted that one of the largest contributing factors to the increase...
With finalists from 15 countries, among them Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Botswana, Burundi, Algeria, Egypt, and Ivory Coast, the two KTN journalists were the only television finalists from the East African region. Standard Group CEO Sam Shuley and KTN's managing editor Joe Ageo were at hand to congratulate the two. And it was a double win for the Standard Group. Dominic Omondi of the Standard won the EcoBank Economic and Business Award for his piece, How Thriving Reject Economy is Allowing the Poor to Live the High Life of the Rich. Isaac Otidi Amuke won the Features Award for his three-part series, Facing the Mediterranean, which was published on the Commonwealth Writers blog, while the Daily Nation's Jeboit Kigen won the Mohammed Amin Photographic Award for his photograph, Another Kind of Shower. The winners will have the opportunity to participate in the CNN Journalism Fellowship at the CNN headquarters in Atlanta. The CNN Award is now in its 21st year. Rita Tinina, KTN News.
Such a proud moment for the KTN family. Congratulations once again are in order to Ashamwilu and Rashid Edi. And I understand they will be arriving tonight at about 11 p.m. Most of us will definitely be there to welcome them. We can't wait to see them. But away from that, days to the national examinations and learning has been disrupted at most schools in Ganze and Magarini over the ongoing hunger crisis. Two schools are on the verge of closing down due to absenteeism. And there is worry that that this may affect preparations for the examinations. KTN's Coast reporter Francis Ontomwa with an update.
Last Friday, Transport CS James Macharia led a high-powered government delegation in issuing tablets to learners at this facility. Hours later, however, no one is talking about the tablets. Their focus is only food and water. Pupils and their parents gather outside their classrooms, waiting for a water tanker to supply them with water. The desperation is obvious. Some feel priorities may have been misplaced.
Hiyo ambayo mnasema pengine ni zile ambazo mnasema, lakini muhimu ni chakula. Mtoto akule ndo andapata nguvu ya kwenda shule na kwenda pale ambako mwenyewe amefikiria.
Huku kwehu nisho mkonasho kare hakuna kitu. Ahoho manenda sukuli makizafika manakala vio. Muhadiziloni. Shani mhoho wa sukuli beye.
Crops have failed and the weather conditions are worsening. The school calendar is still on, but some can no longer stick to the program. Weekends are particularly a headache for most parents here. Mid-morning, and Mzee Shikaribaya is hitting the road into the forest. From his appearance, he looks like he's deeply lost in reverie, and every step is made with caution. He shoulders the hopes of his extended family. He's still got a very long distance to cover.
Well, it's a dry jungle here at Bamba, and already we've covered some 3 kilometers with Mzee Shikaribaya, and 2 more to go. He's headed into the jungle to look for special tubers, mtunguru, which will be the main dish of the day. Well, most of them, he tells me, have already been uprooted. Let's see whether he'll be lucky today.
Lucky he is, and he finally spots these shrubs. He digs into the ground carefully. This tuber will be taken home, and his wife will prepare a special drink for the children. They say it can last one for a day.
Tunabandika kwenye moto. Alafu tunakoroga mpaka ile ukiona sasa ile povu imeisha. Sasa ndio tunachukua kikombe kila mtu hapo nyumbani tunakunywa. Na ukinywa hiyo mti huu unamaliza kama masaa 4 5 ikele ndani ya tumbo unasikia mimi nishakula kitu.
Mzee Baya says it's not the first time that they're experiencing this climatic phenomena, but this year things are more grave.
Hiyo njaa imezidi tena sana. Sababu mfuko moja kama mimi na familia ya watoto kama 7 8, sasa mfuko moja hautoshi.
Some are more creative in expressing their concerns.
Raisi twakulilia bamba tunakufanja.
Animals keep dying by the day, and fear is rife that diseases may start to spread. This man found a cow that had died a few hours earlier, and they could not just ignore the meat. Residents say supply of humanitarian aid has been slow and inadequate, and there is growing fear that things may get out of hand, especially for school-going children. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Kilifi.
Let's now shift our focus to Kitui County, where residents of Endau and the neighboring wards in Kitui East Sub-County are grappling with drought. And as Akisa Wandera reports from Kitui, residents have to walk long distances to access boreholes that are already stretched.
Endau and Ngamba Hills surround parched wards in the remote nerves of Kitui East Sub-County. Endau Malalani is one of them. The burden of arid and semi-arid land such as these manifests in the search for water. Here, residents pay for it with extremely long hours in cash and lost opportunity. Dorcas Mulundi Kilonzo is a mother of 8, 7 daughters and 1 son. She has to compete with the 15,000 residents in this ward to get water for her family and livestock. Her day, when the sun is at its worst, could begin and end here.
Kama hivi mimi nitoka nyumbani saa 12 nikaja hapa mtoni. Naona vile pale juu imefika na sijarudi nyumbani. Sio ni ngumu pia. Nikifika nyumbani naona kama kuna kazi nitafanya.
The last time this river Nziu flowed, a tributary of the Tana River,
residents tell us was December last year, up to the crevices seen on these banks. However, from as early as April and May, failing rains are a clear sign of drought. This hand-dug wells on this same river show just how far they will go to get water not just for themselves, but also for their animals.
Ile hatua tumechukua ya kuchimba hizi visima imetugharimu tutoke nyumbani jioni tukuje kuchimba, ndio akina mama waache nyumbani wakiangalia maslahi ya watoto na ng'ombe na mbuzi. Nataka watusaidie na maji kama inawezekana, na watafute permanent solution.
Cha kustaibisha ni kwamba baada ya kupata huru sasa ni miaka 52, na haya ndio maisha watu wetu wanaishi, kushimba vizima na kuharibu wakati mwingi wakitafuta maji.
Just a few kilometers away, the Ndetani borehole is the last resort for many residents. Sunk by the county government of Kitui, it is the only remaining functional one for now. A 20-litre container costs 5 shillings, but the water is not fresh enough for them to drink.
Kwa hivyo tuna shida, kuna kiangazi ile unaona hakuna nyazi, hakuna nini na hakuna maji hata.
Kitui County has had its history of drought cast in an arid and semi-arid landscape. Many non-governmental organizations are taking the responsibility of alleviating the scarcity. But with the county government in place, the responsibility shifted. It's a sensitive project. We sought answers from leaders, many who have cited the topographical disadvantage and given temporary solutions for the estimated 1.2 million residents of this county. Boreholes, reservoirs, proposed dams.
NDMA, National Drought Management Authority, was very pivotal, and sooner than later we will have a drought resilient.
But the picture painted here is real, and residents need permanent solutions, expecting that in this time and age, the long trips to get clean, accessible water and perennial drought will not be the definitive quality of this county. Dorcas Wandera, KTN News, Kitui County.
About 1.3 million Kenyans have been affected by that drought, and that will form the basis of our discussion later on in the program. To stick to checkpoint right here. But let's now get into politics. Deputy President William Ruto is defending the Jubilee administration over claims it is marginalizing some regions. The Deputy President said the government is serving all Kenyans irrespective of how they voted in the last general election. Meanwhile, CODCO Principal Raila Odinga has asked those living along the border between Nandi and Kisumu counties to coexist peacefully.
For the second day running, Deputy President William Ruto pitched tent in the western region, touring Lurambi area of Kakamega County. Ruto, who was accompanied by legislators from the region, most of whom decamped to Jubilee Party, asked the locals to join and support the government, arguing it serves all.
Lakini mimi naona tutaelewana. Safari hii hatuwawachi. Hatuwawachi hapana. Ati muende upinzani tena? Hapana. No. Hapana. Kwanza mimi nikiwa jirani yenu hapa, ati sasa mimi tuende tuunde serikali na majirani wako msituni. Sasa mimi kazi yangu itakuwa ni nini?
Sisi wale marafiki zenu wale tuliamua 2013 March kwamba tutafanya na nyinyi pamoja, nataka niwahakikishie kwamba tutaendelea kufanya na nyinyi pamoja.
Wewe umetumwa hapa Kakamega kwenda kusiaga unga na unapata iko tinga mbili. Moja mshipi imekatika, ingine inasiaga. Na wewe unaweka mahindi mahali mshipi imekatika, kichwa yako itakuwa mzuri. Ikirudi watakwambia imekuwa fupi, waende sasa wapeleke Kisumu na wewe bado unangoja na watu wana njaa.
Ruto also lauded religious leaders for their continued efforts to preach peace and unity among those in government and those in the opposition.
Kuna haja ya siasa ya ugomvi, kuweka chuki, kuweka uchungu kwa wananchi. Hawa ni wabaya, wale ni wanini, wale ni nini. Hiyo siasa ya zamani hiyo haina maana. tuweke watu ambao watatuambia barabara itajengwa namna gani, stima itazambazwa namna gani, maji itafika kwa njia gani.
Kwa maana sisi hatutaki kupotezwa. Vile tunapotezwa kuja hapa, tuanza kumfuata tena, tunauliza tunaenda wapi? Unajua tuko na sauti mbili. Sauti ya huyu Ruto government. Na kuna sauti nyingine iko kwa giza. Iko kwa giza inatokea huko, kujeni huku, kujeni huku. Sisi tunashangaa. Huyu Musalia anatuita tuingie wapi? Tuingie kwa giza.
Meanwhile, CODCO Principal Raila Odinga toured Kibigori area that borders Nandi and Kisumu counties in a bid to preach peace between the local communities that have been fighting over cattle rustling.
Hii ni sherehe ya kuleta amani baina ya majirani. Bila amani hakuna maendeleo. Sasa yale ambayo wamefanya hapa, mmeona wazee wa Nandi na wazee wa Jaluo wametumia kimila ya Wanandi na kimila ya Wajaluo kuleta amani.
The former Prime Minister also asked the locals to continue supporting CORD coalition, saying they will remain united and that soon they will be telling Kenyans who will be the coalition's presidential flag bearer between him, Kalonzo Musyoka and Moses Wetangula. Chris Tairu, KTN News.
Discussion, which is just how secure is Kenya in terms of food security after we've seen the situation in about 23 countries. They are 23 counties, beg your pardon, they are drought ravaged, and about 1.3 million Kenyans are affected by this particular situation. And joining me in studio on my immediate right is Frederick Njau, who is a climate change expert. Thank you very much for coming in, Frederick.
Thank you.
We also have Laila Libertro, who is a human rights activist. Of course, you will be giving us the human rights perspective of this particular situation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Akisa.
And finally, we have Dr. Mary Madenge, who is from Tegemeo Institute of Agricultural Policy and Development, and quite well versed with matters to do with food security in the country. Thank you very much, Dr. for coming in. Thank you. All right, and straight to it. Many Kenyans who are watching the stories that we have been running on drought, the announcement made by the Planning and Devolution Cabinet Secretary Mwangi Kiunjuri of the drought situation in Kenya. There's one question on everyone's mind. Are we food secure? I'll start with you, Dr.
That question, I can answer it yes and no. Yes, because the problem we have today of the counties and the people that are going hungry, I would call it a matter of distribution. We have one part of the country that has surplus food, particularly when we think about maize. The long rain season, maize is being harvested, and in the North Rift, we do have a lot of maize. And so we're talking about having a surplus in one region and having a deficit in another. And so the question being of distribution and moving the food where it is to where it is needed. And we would expect that that can happen very quickly. No, because we always have perennial food security issues. And while right now we're talking about distribution, there are instances that we are talking about availability. And I talk about maize here because we are heavy consumers of maize. And in Kenya, when there is no maize, there is no food. And there are instances when we do not have enough stocks. And I think right now we may be okay in terms of the stocks we have in the country. But I think come 5 months, May next year, I think we need to think very well whether we have enough stocks to take us to the next harvest, which comes from the South Rift about July, August, and then later on October to November. So I think we need to plan, to think through whether there is enough between now and the next harvest for the country in terms of availability. And this is thinking through that the weatherman has already given a warning that there may be a La Nina phenomenon that is going to affect the short rains crop that comes from October. This October, the short rains from eastern Kenya. And if the La Nina does take effect, then that's going to affect the production of maize. And I'm talking about maize here, a little biased on that, given we consume a lot of it. If that then the depressed rains due to La Nina does lower production, that will have an effect on the entire stock we have in the country. We also have issue for the recent drought that cuts across the region. And so we may not expect to get maize from the neighbors that we usually do, Uganda, Tanzania, because this is a drought that has affected the region, and therefore as a country we want to take stock of what we have and take measures that are needed. If we need to bring in at the right time imports, I think that needs to be done early enough, and therefore what is important is close monitoring and checking of what we have, the stocks, and then we can take actions as needed. But right now, yes, we have food. It just needs to be moved from one region to another.
Better planning and distribution.
Exactly.
All right, you mentioned something very important on the La Nina phenomenon, and I think that touches on what you do on a daily basis. You are a climate change expert. Where are we as of now? Because there's the La Nina phenomenon, and we seemingly have a problem with our food basket. How does climate change directly affect us?
One thing that you have to be clear about is that we are facing a global problem, that climate is changing all over the world, and there have been rising temperatures, and that leads to drought or flooding in some areas. And this, you must say that it's done is because of how human being has been developing over the years, and because climate change comes because of emissions of greenhouse gases that are coming from a fossil fuel, and as well as changing land uses. So the moment you either destroy your forest, you consume a lot of fossil fuel, then there is emission that changes the climate, either by in some areas you get more rains, and in some areas you have temperature increases. In this case, Kenya, in most cases, the temperature has been rising. We don't have, in some cases, we have abnormal rains that you cannot rely on in terms of if you want to do proper farming, because either you're not able to predict when the rain will come, or you're not able to, the farmers are not able to plan themselves how they're going to do their farming. This situation now become more serious because then it affects both the pastoralists, it affects the farmers as well, and the country end up being food insecure. I must admit, we must mention here that the way we manage our land, the way we do our cultivation as well contributes to emissions. Because in most cases, the land use changes. Either you are cutting forests down to do cultivation. Through that, then you don't have offsets. We don't have lands that can be able to offset, or what we call carbon, can sequester carbon, or kind of take that carbon that is excess and leads to these temperature rises. What we need then is a way of how we are going to either increase our forest covers or do cultivation that is very sensitive to the nature itself, and then we are able to address this issue of climate change.
So are there any man-made problems we've brought upon ourselves that are coming back to haunt us with such situations?
Yes, it's a way the world is moving towards. Either we are doing how we do our infrastructure, how we even use our machines. Is the energy that you're using efficient? If it's not efficient, then you're having more emissions. There is currently in the global discussion, we want to make sure that the temperature doesn't rise beyond 2 degrees centigrade, 2 degrees. If it goes beyond that, then there's going to be a catastrophe that may not be reversible. So the situation is to try as much as possible to reduce the emissions such that you don't reach that cap that is of 2 degrees. But if we go beyond that, then the situation will not be reversed. But we must say that we are living with the climate change currently. So we have to adapt. By adaptation is that we have to look for ways that we live with this climate change. Secondly, we have to mitigate. By mitigation is that we have to do projects either that are energy efficient and they reduce this emission, or we do projects that like reforestation that absorb carbon and then the emission is reduced.
All right, I'll get back to you and to just take a look at a deeper look at some of the solutions that we would have towards this problem and how we would adapt to the climate change. It is a global phenomenon, as you said, and we need ways of adapting to it. But Laila, you are a human rights activist. About 1.3 million Kenyans are affected, and we've seen pictures that are very unfortunate and very sad. Is there cause for worry that there could be violation of human rights in this case, given that food is a fundamental right to humans?
So I think, Akisa, to answer that, it would be good by starting with what our right to food is. So the right to food is captured in Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya, which really says you have the right to be free from hunger and to have adequate food of acceptable quality. So I think the important thing to emphasize is that because it's a human right, it's like the right to being born free, the ability to breathe, having food is not negotiable. I think in our everyday lives, the right to food means that you can access food in sufficient quantity and quality, either because you've grown it or because you've been able to buy it, to the extent that you can live a meaningful and productive life. So in many ways that right is being violated at the moment, because that's not true for many Kenyans. I think there's also one thing that I wanted to mention is that there's an interesting relationship between this idea of the right to food and food security. So essentially we often hear or read about one or the other, but essentially they're the same thing. Yeah. So they both mean that I have food of my choosing, diverse foods, and foods that are rich in nutritional content. So the only difference in terminology would be that food security is not a legal concept per se, whereas the right to food places a legal obligation on the state. And I think another thing that I also wanted to raise was that I very much liked the definition adopted in Kenya's food security bill, although that bill is still in draft, around the right to food, which goes so far as to say that if I have my right to food realizes, it also means I'm free from a fear of hunger. And I think fear is a complex and highly subjective emotion. A stimulus or experience of fear is very different from one person to the next. So it's a very ambitious and noble objective of the state to aim to deliver on the right to food in a way that it means that every person won't be scared of going hungry.
Does this worry you as a human rights activist, the situation in the country right now? Does it worry you?
Very much so. That's why I'm here today.
All right, I'll get back to you in a bit, but to you, Dr. still on food security, you mentioned that we are getting it wrong when it comes to distribution and planning, where some parts of the country have a surplus and some other countries are lacking, some other counties, beg your pardon, are lacking. But when we look at the counties that are lacking, it is like we can't actually establish a pattern. They are usually the affected counties. Come rain, come sunshine. These are the counties that are always affected by drought. The same counties sometimes that are affected by floods. What does that say about just how we are handling this particular situation, coming from food security, planning the infrastructure, as he says, and of course handling climate change?
Yes, you're right, Akisa, in the sense that this is not new. The same counties, the same episodes happening again. This is not the first time we're seeing them. We saw them recently, they've been there. And what is surprising is that this keeps repeating itself year after year, and we don't seem to learn as Kenyans. And, we don't see enough being done. even by government, to ensure that this doesn't happen. What it means, these counties are semi-arid. They, you know, and we Kenya continue to rely on rain-fed agriculture. He's just talked about issues of climate change. The climate is changing, you know, variability through and through, and therefore the over-reliance on rain-fed agriculture for these households is a problem, because it means soon, one day or the other, there's going to be drought. And therefore, we have to think about irrigation, and we can laud the government for that, for the investment that has been put on that. But I would say that that's not enough, that more needs to be done. We have to think about water harvesting and water storage. This could be done at county levels, so even partnership between national government and county government in terms of thinking, when we have floods, what do we do with that water so that it can be useful at another time for production. But by and large, even those households that we are talking about, we also have to think about getting them out of agriculture if that's not what is their business for that region. If we think about comparative advantage, so investments in rural sectors, in infrastructure, in roads, can allow these households to be able to earn income from other activities, non-farm activities. So we have to think about it broadly in terms of tackling food security for these people. Because even when we talk about distribution, and yes, that's the problem right now, if they have no money to buy, it still is a problem. And so, one, we have to make it accessible, but it also has to be affordable to these households. And the very needy is really, it's been stated, the right to food is the basic human right that all of us should have. It's really demeaning to see those households suffer like that. And yet it is our obligation, it's the obligation of the government to feed its citizenry. And therefore those who can't afford, there has to be a way of reaching them through emergency relief. And it's possible to have NCPB depot that are there, and food is already distributed from the surplus area and waiting there to be distributed, than having to do it when there is an issue. So yes, clearly the issues of climate change, we have to think about them when we are thinking about these regions. We have to think that perhaps some of the production systems that they do not have a comparative advantage. And what are these other activities that we can get them into to be able to feed themselves?
She's mentioned climate change as, of course, one of the fundamental things we need to look at. And the same question I've posed to her. The 23 counties that are said to be most affected by the drought, half of these counties are the counties that are usually affected by floods. So it's two extremes happening in the same areas. How would you assess that?
It's quite a situation that we are in, that we need what we call early warning system that's supposed to be in place, that before these floods happen, before the drought even happen, we are supposed to be aware, or the government need to already communicate this way in advance, that this is going to happen, such that people are able to know maybe this is not the best season for me to waste my money and do farming, that at the end of the day I'm not going to get anything. Or maybe during this rain season there are going to be floods, and maybe we need to move to higher grounds, or maybe we need to do a different cultivation altogether. So what we need is one is early warning systems that are very ready, or they are accessible. This information is accessible to the very local person. Secondly, we need to have technologies that can be able as well to help these communities adapt to the climate change. And thirdly, sometimes we tend to forget if there is incoherence, and there is incoherence in the approaches, how the government is approaching things. For example, if the Ministry of Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Agriculture, they are not working in tandem, and there's a bit of incoherence, then you end up having people or communities that are not aware, or they are more vulnerable to the situation if it happens at any given moment.
Civic education, would you vouch for that?
Civic education, yes, and sometime again, maybe another problem that we look at is looking at climate change as in one track, or a binary kind of this climate change and other things. But the situation is climate change is all interlinked in everything that we do each and every day.
Yes.
We should look at climate change as intersecting in various sectors, not only in environment. Not the people from environment sector should not be the only ones speaking about climate change, because it affects infrastructure, it affects energy, it affects water sector. So it cuts across. So and I would imagine even in education would have very much early. Even in schools, people should be aware or should be taught of how to address these things early enough, and I would think that education could be a key as well.
Are we treading on a dangerous path?
Yes, we are. If you look at the global, and I look at the global eye, the rate of, for example, of there's what we call planetary boundary. There are those boundaries that you have, whereby if you go outside that, and there are 9 of them. One of them is climate change. We're already at the point whereby if we go beyond that, then we are not able to reverse. Land use, again, we are at the point whereby if we go beyond that boundary, is a red zone. If you cannot be able to go back to that boundary whereby you feel, it's like a donut where you feel that there's a safe space.
Yeah.
So to that planetary boundary, including the use of fossil fuel, aerosols, and other gases that that contributes to climate change. If we go beyond that boundary, then we are not able to reverse or to a safer ground. So what we need then is the mechanism and or kind of a multidisciplinary kind of approach that looks at all the sectors and see how well can we either be climate proofed or as well be able to do things that will reduce these emissions. And vis-a-vis as well, like she mentioned already, we need to apply new technology, for example, in agriculture, like smart agriculture that addresses increase in food availability, helps farmers to be resilient, and thirdly reduces emission. And then you're able to address all those things.
All right. Laila, as we wind up, you've mentioned that this is very worrying on your end. Definitely it worries everyone, not only Kenyans, but across board. What are some of the things you will be advocating for?
I think one of the important things to be aware of is that we've spoken a lot about climate change and the effects of extreme weather patterns on food supply or agricultural production and even distribution. I think one of the important things also to be aware of is that hunger in Kenya is a chronic problem. So after the drought is finished in Kilifi and Kitui, like you've just shown, the problem of hunger continues and the problem of food insecurity continues. And I really think that it's an important solution to that would be to include those people who are chronically food insecure as being, and include and invest in people that are chronically food insecure as being part of the solution to the problem. And I think also I'd be advocating that people think critically about information that they consume in the media, what they read, hear and see, and to really be able to question when statements are made that says we are food secure. Maybe that's based on the number of maize bags that are stored in strategic grain reserves or a state of non-famine. I think it's important to really think about what food security means and to think critically about purely only structural or technical explanations of the ongoing problem, so that we're not sitting here this time next year talking about the same thing.
All right, going forward, what do you expect to see?
Would expect, let me back up a little and say something following up on what Laila has said, that it's possible that we continue talking about this in years to come, where we are today, and unless serious measures are put in place. Looking at ourselves, we find ourselves we are a large net importer of our basic food commodities. When we talk about maize, we occasionally meet our demand. Many times we we have to import, maybe up to 20%. Rice, which is a major food commodity, and some of our studies do show that per capita consumption of rice is increasing, is going up. We are net importer of 75 to 80%. And so with population increase, with increase in consumption per capita, we are expecting that the demand will be going very high. Wheat, we are net importer, 40 to 60%. Sugar, edible oils, and I can go on. So we are net importers of very basic commodities that we consume. And yet we do have a comparative advantage, the environment, to grow most of those. And so the question is, how can we not get ourselves? And so we need to see emphasis, massive emphasis and investment in some of these, ensuring that there is seed of high quality to increase productivity, ensuring that markets can function efficiently, that there is sufficient policy environment to allow the private sector, to allow businesses to thrive in agribusiness, because it's important that that happens. When you think about even the food now, it is the role of it's actually the private sector that moves food from one region to the other. But there must be some breakdown that this is not happening. Either there is not sufficient demand and effective demand, so they can't pay for it, or there is an environment that is not good enough. And therefore, going forward, I think increase in budgetary allocation for agriculture, which we find has been declining, even below the 10% allowed through the heads of state in the AU, plus policy environment that allows agriculture to thrive, competitiveness, reducing the cost of production, and many things that we want to see, major investments in agriculture. And I think there was some promise of that end. And we hope that it can come to fruition when the president did offer support for agriculture during the recent AGRF.
All right, thank you very much. I think we'll end it at that. We hope this kind of conversations will go on in the kitchen cabinet, so to speak, of the government. But ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in tonight. Frederick Njau is a climate change expert. Laila Libetro is a human rights activist. And finally, Dr. Mary Madenge is from the Tegemeo Institute of Agriculture, Policy and Development. Thank you very much for coming in for Checkpoint tonight. Now, the inception of the women representative sit through affirmative action was seen as the ultimate solution towards the unequal gender representation in the country. But 3 years down the line, questions abound on just how effective this opposition is. Tonight on Spotlight 2017, I prepared a report on the Wananchi's understanding of the role of women representatives and their impact on the constituents. Take a look.
People say, what do these women do? What are we supposed to do? You go to the Constitution. What was the woman representative supposed to do? It's not there. It's not written. The only thing that's written about women representatives is that there will be 47 women elected.
Remember, the same house has 281 men. So every time the question is only asked on the 47, I think the same question needs to be asked to the 281 men. What has been their role? What have they done to further democracy in this country?
Kila kuchao na kila wanawake wanavyojitokeza, pia watu wanabadilisha mawazo na watu sasa wanaona ni kwamba kweli jambo hili linafanyika.
It was a vision meant to bridge the gender gap in leadership by increasing the number of women in parliament for Kenya, born by the new constitution in 2010. A dream that 6 years on remains hazy to many who still do not understand what role the women play, leading to an intense debate on their relevance.
From Machakos County, I don't know the name of the women rep, and I don't know the role they play.
Tujafeel kazi ile yenye inafanya na women representative.
Sioni maana yake kwa sababu itolewe kwa sababu sijaona maana yake.
And since being elected into office, all the 47 women representatives have struggled to define their roles under the devolved structures.
This first lot of women representatives have had to deal with the issue of finding their space. What are we supposed to do? Do we have a special role apart from just being a member of parliament? Is there something additional we should do?
We've done some things right in terms of settling down, in terms of getting ourselves into parliament properly as members of parliament. Remember, we even came with a different title. The title of women representative in a house of members of parliament already disadvantages you in some ways.
As they tried to carve a niche for themselves, the women admit that the financial challenge was a major headache for them during the first 2 years in office. This meant their visibility at the counties was at the bare minimum. The women now receive 2 billion Kenya shillings through the Affirmative Action Social Development Fund.
I think we have moved. We definitely have moved from a point where we wondered, okay, are we just regular members of parliament? Which at first we were told, yes, you're just a regular member of parliament like any other. But then when it came to CDF, we now didn't have the CDF. Now we were irregular in the sense that we were no longer equal, you know, ikakuwa shamba la wanyama, you know, the animal farm, where some animals are more equal than others. That's when we noticed that, no, we have to cut our own space and cover our own niche. And this is where we came up with apart from just being regular members of parliament, we have to look seriously at issues of affirmative action groups, women, young people, people with disabilities.
But was the lack of a kitty the only hurdle between them executing their mandate and their electorate enjoying these gains? Many would ask, just how effective has this seat been since its inception?
Hata katika Affirmative Fund, kuna kina mama ambao wamechimbiwa borehole, wameanza miradi ya maji, tumefanya miradi ya posho mill, tumefanya miradi ambayo hata kina mama sasa na vijana wanasema kwamba kumbe hiki kiti ni kiti ambacho kilikuwa na faida sana.
We are doing value addition to women, for example. I have a group that does aloe vera farming, and through affirmative action, they've been able to acquire funds to do value addition. So now they have produced lotions, they have produced soaps.
But are Kenyans satisfied?
Nasikia kuna pesa yenye inatolewa lakini sijawahi iona, sijawahi jua inatolewa wapi na inatolewa kwa wakina nani. Na itusaidii chochote.
Na hiyo kiti ni kuharibu ushuru yetu, haina umuhimu wowote.
Okay, I really don't know the work of the county rep, women county rep.
However, while their presence at the counties continues to be questioned, the women seem to have picked themselves up in terms of legislation. Among bills sponsored by the women are the Access to Information Bill, sponsored by Nyeri County's Priscilla Nyukabi, Nyandarua County's Wanjiko Mohia's Persons with Disabilities Amendment Bill 2013 that was passed by the National Assembly and forwarded to the Senate for consideration. The Sexual Offences Amendment Bill 2016 by Busia County's Florence Mutua that clearly defines a number of indecent acts that include inappropriate touching and other forms of sexual harassment and is expected to go for a second reading which entails debate on the floor of the National Assembly. Baringo County's Grace Kiptui's Basic Education Amendment Bill 2016 is also expected for a second reading on the floor of the House, and the Engineering Technologists and Technicians Bill 2015, sponsored by Bomet County's Cecilia Ngetich, and awaits assent by the President. Massive contribution has also been made towards the realization of the family bills like the Marriage Act 2014 and the Matrimonial Property Act 2013 and Protection Against Domestic Violence Act. Their presence in House committees is visible for the first time in Kenyan history. Currently, there is a huge debate on the proposal by the Auditor General to slash the number of members of the National and County Assemblies, citing overrepresentation and huge public wage bill. The women representative sits seemingly one of those targeted. Now, with barely 10 months to the general election, many of these women will want to defend their seats. It can only get better, they say.
If we are lucky to get a re-election, which will most likely also be the final one, given that affirmative action seats are not meant to keep you there for too long, you definitely will see an improvement. just like you see with second-time members of parliament.
And actually, first of all, this position of affirmative action position is supposed to phase out, I think, in 20 years, according to law. And it's only fair for women who have come under affirmative action also to go into the main, that's what they're saying, main positions now, to vie for constituency or to vie for governor, to vie for senator. So I think it shows that they're ready now to battle it out with other, let's say, exactly.
Some, however, have expressed interest in vying for single constituencies. Mombasa County's Mishimboko is one of them. For her, it is all about being able to compete with the men and giving other women chances.
Na sisi kina mama lazima tuoneshe our strength. Na tuoneshe pia sisi tumekuwa kisiasa. Sisi pia tumekuwa kiuwezo. Sisi pia tumekuwa kiuongozi. Na kuwa kiuongozi, we have to compete, and competition is healthy. Competition is healthy. Sasa kama sisi ambao tumepata empowerment kidogo, hatuwezi kuingia kwa competition with our male counterpart. Je, wale ambao wako chini bado?
Now, it is without a doubt that the new constitution brought with it improvement when it comes to women leadership in this country. But as we head into the next general election, the conversation changes from the amount of women in leadership in this country to how much meaningful gain their role would mean to those, especially in the grassroots level. Akisa Wandera, KTN News. Well, just how effective has your women representative been? Would you vote her back? Let's continue that conversation online. Now, just 4 months after KTN News exclusively aired a feature about an ailing Brazilian woman who lives in Likuyani, Kakamega County, and there's good news already. Maria Antonio Barbosa dos Santos will soon reunite with her family in Brazil. She last saw them 44 years ago. Elvis Koskei now reports.
At least najaribu kutafuta pesa wenye watasurvive hata kama ni madawa na machakula. Kama ukufa bila sisi ukutana tena. Hii miaka yote.
As the saying goes, when life gives you lemon, you make a lemonade out of it. To Maria Antonia Barbosa dos Santos, she may be down but not out. 4 months ago, attempts to reach out to her siblings in Penedo, Brazil had become impossible. There was no hope that she would set foot in her motherland of Brazil to reunite with her relatives there.
Yes, ndugu ya mzee yangu taka kupanga nguo zake aende.
But today, there is light beyond the tunnel. Things have changed for better for Maria Antonio Barbosa dos Santos, alias Mama Brazil, who lives in Likuyani area, Kakamega County. It is just a matter of time before she reunites with members of her family in Brazil who have been separated from her for the last 44 years, thanks to KTN News that exclusively reported her plight.
Okay, nashukuru kwa KTN. Kwa last time akuja hapa kuna dangasa na standard kila pahali nyinyi unajaribu kutafuta maisha yangu. Nyinyi sinakuwa hapo mwezi ya 5. Hawa naletea mishakula mwezi ya 6, blanketi, ndoo ya maji, vitu kidogo kidogo.
Mero shukrani watu wa KTN.
Armed with a valid passport that was recently renewed, the two have set a date with the Brazilian doctors as they seek to get treatment from various ailments.
Karibisha mimi mzuri, so narudi nyumbani, mtoto mpotesha. Miaka hii yote, hata keze ndugu zangu hata wengine hata wewe ujui ili ku 40 years sahi misiju.
Neighbors who flocked their homestead upon receiving the news of their planned travel described the two as inseparable partners who have braved hunger and health conditions to live together.
Ninga ya KTN na KTN News waliweza kuangazia habari zake, na nashukuru kwamba majuma mawili tu baada ya hilo kuangaziwa tuliweza kupata simu kutoka ubalozi wa Brazil. Wakatuma mjumbe wao Bwana Nesta Mota akaja hadi hapa, akaweza kuona hali ya mama na akasema atashughulika kuona atasaidika vipi.
So nashukuru sana kwa KTN kwa kazi ile mmefanya, na ni changamoto yetu kwamba mtasaidia hata wengi zaidi.
Mama Brazil casually jokes with her husband on how she will travel with him to the shows and teach him how to swim once they land in Brazil.
Naamua tu, napenda yeye kwa sababu si kukula pesa yake kama yeye uko kijana, alafu azoeka hivi, hakuna kazi, anapata stroke, mi watch. Naona hii si ni zambu mbaya. Afadhali ni kufa, yeye akufa kwa makona yangu. Na mishika yeye, oda yeye achika mimi kwanza.
According to the embassy, all arrangements are in place for their travel and treatment in Sao Paulo state in Brazil. The two are looking forward to good times ahead. The family hopes to be back to Kenya. As from KTN News, we wish them well in their future endeavors. Elvis Kosgei, KTN News, Likuyani area, Kakamega County.